Specific laws have really just one application. The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. All right, that's about you and God. There are no other applications. I can't go to my employees tomorrow morning and say, I am the boss, your employer who raised you up out of unemployment. You shall have no other bosses before me. I can't do that and consider it a biblical principle because it's not an extension of the biblical principle that's calling us to put God first in our lives. So when we look at a specific law, we need to understand the application under the law and our commitment to it under grace. The law was very clear. No other gods before me. Idol worship was common in that time, even among God's chosen people. The Israelites mingled with other people groups and picked up their gods and tried to sort of mix them together with the true God and have it both ways. But our God is a jealous God, and he was not having any of that. So he made it clear in his list of commandments. He made it first in his list of commandments that he is the only true God, and he alone is to be worshipped. Now, how many of you here this morning, when you first became Christians, how many of you had to throw away your idols to Athena or Baal? Anyone? Anyone have an Asherim pole or an altar to Zeus that had to be destroyed? No? Because that's the law. No more idols. No other gods. So what is our commandment on the matter under grace? How could it be possible to require more than having no other gods? You can't have less than none. So what does Jesus say about the matter? Jesus tells us in Luke 14:26 that if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, his wife and children, and brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. We don't have time to go in the whole context here, but it should be fairly obvious that Jesus wasn't telling us to literally hate the members of our own family. That wouldn't be true to the context of the passage, and more importantly, it wouldn't be true to the overall character of Jesus Christ in his message. What he's saying, if you read the whole thing in context, is that compared to how much we love God, anything else should be so far below it that it seems like hate by comparison. Do you get that? An example, back in the days before we moved to Lakeland, I used to work for a telecommunications company over in Tampa. And sometimes I had to go to trade shows, and at one of them I put my business card in a fishbowl, and I won a Bose Lifestyle 40 stereo system. I don't know if you know Bose, but it's got those little tiny dual-cooled speakers, great big sound. It's got this touchscreen, oval-shaped touchscreen remote that it's the only thing in my house that nobody else knows how to work. It's the only thing Max can't run in our whole house, and he can't run it because I don't want him to know how to because it's mine. Anyway, it's a valuable prize, and I was excited about winning it. And it arrived at my house. They shipped it to me, a great big, very heavy package. It arrived at my house on a Saturday morning, and I remember it very clearly. January 13th, 2001. The day my first son was born. Any other day that whole year, that would have been the best thing I had gotten that day. But on that day, compared to that little baby boy, the stereo meant nothing. If the Green Goblin showed up at my house tomorrow, and for those of you who know me and have been wondering how long I could talk until I made a comic book reference, that's 14 minutes. But if the Green Goblin showed up at my house tomorrow and said he was going to destroy either my 9-year-old son or my 9-year-old Bose stereo, I wouldn't have to think about it. That's the sort of thing supervillains do, by the way, just to be mean. But if he forced me to pick between Max and the Bose, I would not have to weigh the pros and cons and think it over and render a carefully considered decision. No, give me Max. You can smash the Bose. In fact, I'll smash it for you. I hate the Bose compared to how much I love my son. Got myself all worked up. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. I'll give you a topic. The Holy Roman Empire was not really holy or Roman or an empire. Discuss. All right. Do you love God and put him first in all things? So much so that everything else pales by comparison. Your parents, your job, your spouse, your children. Because that is what grace demands from you. Now, there are other laws that are paradigmatic, which is to say they set a paradigm or a principle which has other applications. Paradigmatic is a great word to work in the conversation this week, by the way. 5 syllables. Paradigmatic law is one that can be generalized or extrapolated to other situations. An example of a paradigm might be, imagine if you came to the church one Wednesday night, you're going to help out with the Explorers Kids program, and when you get there, I'm digging a pit in the yard and filling it in with water because I'm going to make a church swimming pool. And no, kids, we can't really dig a big pit in the yard and fill it in with water, make a church swimming pool, so don't even ask. But so you come to help, and I say, all right, look, here's your job. I need you to keep the little Explorer kids away from the pit. But if one of them should fall in the pit and twist their ankle, call this phone number, and the church nurse will come out and help you with it, okay? 5 minutes later, one of the youth group teenagers comes out, trips over a hose, and sprains their wrist. Would you have to wonder what to do? No, you'd call the nurse because all the details are different, but the paradigm is enough to tell you what to do. It's kind of like Clue, right? You had little Max Rowe in the pit with a twisted ankle, but it was Big Paul Kittelstad on the hose with a sprained wrist. All the details are different, but the paradigm is enough to tell you what to do. Some Old Testament laws are like that. The 5th commandment, for example, honor your father and mother. I'm so glad Gordon's here this morning. Honor your father and mother. Do you think the Israelites had to stop and wonder if they were necessarily to honor their stepfather? Or what should I do if I was raised by my aunt and uncle? No, the paradigm established by honoring your father and mother was enough to extrapolate to other similar situations. So it brings us back to the question of what to do when the New Testament does not specifically make clear our responsibility under grace. And I want to digress just a little bit for a moment to talk about what I think is one of the most misunderstood paradigms in the modern church. And that's the 4th commandment, which is remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The Old Testament law tells us to not work on the Sabbath. And many Christians today will tell you that you should not work on Sunday. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But now that we know that the Old Testament law is still in effect, and we know that grace requires more than the law, is that really the grace application of the Old Testament law? Is not working on Sunday somehow more than not working on the Sabbath? Here are 3 quick reasons why this isn't so. First of all, the Sabbath is not on Sunday. There is no New Testament teaching that actually replaces the Sabbath, which started at sundown on Friday, with Sunday. Second, the standard of not working set in the Old Testament was a lot more stringent than anything we apply to Sundays today. Relaxing in the Barco Lounger and watching football is not in itself doing more than is required by the law. I mean, last weekend I personally didn't do a lick of work on Saturday or Sunday. So does that make me twice as holy? And finally, Paul writes in Romans 14:5 that one man considers one day more sacred than another. Another man considers every day alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. So clearly, the New Testament teaching is not to do more than those under the law by making Sunday even more holy than the Sabbath by somehow doing less than no work. It's a paradigm. It's a pattern established by God at the beginning of time, calling us to keep balance in our lives. All the way back in Genesis 2:2, God set the pattern by resting on the 7th day. And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. God did not rest because he was tired. He rested to demonstrate this paradigm for us. Not working too much, not resting too much, but keeping all things in proportion. For us to do more, we need to keep not just our daily routine, but our whole lives in balance. Our time, our money, our effort, our affections. That is honoring the paradigm that God laid out for us.